Next tonight, we look at one of the most vigorous internal debates in the black community in the past 2 decades. It's the issue of changing from black to African American. It had only been 22 years since the last major name change had occurred. It happened just after a white racist shot James Meredith, the first black graduate of Ole Miss. The shooting occurred on a southern highway as Meredith was leading a voter registration march from Memphis, Tennessee to Jackson, Mississippi. It so enraged student activist Stokely Carmichael that as he emerged from a Greenwood, Mississippi jail where he had been held for his voter registration work, the first words to emerge from his mouth were, "Black Power." It was the beginning of a major new phase in black confidence and self-assertion that captured the imagination and stirred the consciousness of black people all over the world. Now, according to some polls, a majority of black people have said they prefer the term African American. But the issue is far from settled.
I prefer to be called African American because African American reflects the true nature of my cultural heritage.
And I think it's better for you to be called black. What's wrong with that? It's different black. It's black Africans. It's black West Indians, you know. Black is beautiful. That's what I have to say.
I'm an American, whether I'm a black American or what, don't make any difference. I'm just an American.
You had the caucus in the election, they kept calling him Greek American, so being that every black person over here has African heritage, you know, it should be called African American.
Editorials in both black and white publications generally supported the call to use African American. The New York Times called it healthy archaeology, arguing that blacks may now feel comfortable enough in their standing as citizens to adopt the family surname American, and their first name African conveys a pride in cultural heritage that all Americans cherish. Said the Chicago Defender, as the world continues to shrink, Americans who speak to their Africanness with the African American title will likely find the cultural, education, and economic relationship with others much smoother. Opinion also varied among the guests we interviewed in our special Black History Month series.
I always thought that Afro-American or African-American was the appropriate designation. And there is some beneficial effects in acknowledging the reality, the African heritage and the American presence. But that's not the critical issue. The critical issue is gaining power.
I believe that it is important for us as a people to think that we are connected to the world. Because the African diaspora was for real. We were sent to different parts of the world.
Well, naturally, it's our heritage. But all of us here are really educated and exposed to American life. So is that we really are, we have to dig back for this ancestry. I mean, I'm not an African.
It's a very complicated question. So rather than argue over it, let's not give up black, let's not give up Africa. So in all the work that I do, the essays I write, I use both interchangeably.
For more on the story, we turn now to 4 other people with different views. Kwame Ture is an organizer with the All African People's Revolutionary Party, a group attempting to politically unite African people living in 113 countries all over the world. It was his call for black power in 1966, when he was known as Stokely Carmichael, that catapulted the term black into popular usage. Leon Winter is a copy editor for the Wall Street Journal, and last week wrote an article that appeared on the journal's op-ed. Llewellyn is a businessman who owns the 8th largest Coca-Cola bottling company in the country. He also owns television station WKBW, an ABC affiliate in Buffalo. Ramona Edlin is president of the National Urban Coalition. She proposed the name change at the Chicago meeting of black leaders last December. And to you, Ms. Edlin, the current initiative is largely your brainchild. Why is it important to use that term and not black?
Charlene, we have an opportunity to renew values such as mastery and learning, the importance of the family, unity which is of the utmost importance right now, at a time when our children couldn't be in more distress and turmoil, when we face a new century, and it's up to us to be sure that the problem of the 21st century is not also the problem of the color line, as Du Bois prophesied in 1903 this century would be.
But how does African American affect all of that?
Well, we see going back to African cultural ties to the land base that is our mother as crucial in this process. And what I'm hoping is that we can recreate some of the spirit of the movement years, particularly for the children, by going back to values which were stripped systematically from us, as we all know, when we were enslaved for 250 years in this nation.
Mr. Winter, you don't want to change from black.
No, well, I don't disagree that it is important for us to be cognizant of where we come from and the depth of our history that began before slavery. I just don't see the particular need in calling for renewal of the movement to leapfrog over the 400 odd years of history and of proud accomplishments that we can point to and indeed need to reacquaint our children with here in this country first. So I believe that it is important to teach the children and to, in general, imbue Black America with the knowledge of where it comes from, but to focus this effort on claiming what is ours here as Americans, which is the country that we are citizens of and where we pay our taxes.
Mr. Llewellyn, you prefer the term American.
Well, I guess in all of my years on this earth, I've been called about 5 or 6 different things. I've been called black. I've been called Afro-American. Now we're talking about African-American. I've been called Negro. I've been called colored. And what strikes me as a continuous theme or theorem in all of this is the fact that we never have been called full citizens of the United States of America. And what I'd like to see accomplished once and for all is that we are considered as full citizens and have all the rights and privileges there too. All I see is that people in Russia, people in Poland, people in Nicaragua are all packing their bags and heading for the United States of America, feeling it's some kind of panacea or a great place to be. And there must be something here that brings all these people. All I'm saying to you is that I think it's a disgrace that we have been here for well over 200 years and we have not enjoyed these full benefits that a lot of people have come here generation after generation and gotten. And I think that's the key. That's where we ought to go. I'll be very honest with you. If I had my druthers, I wouldn't be worrying so much about whether you call me African American or not. I would like very much to see throughout this country, as other groups have put in museums called Holocaust, to see slavery museums. Museums which show our suffering, our contribution over the years up until the year 1989 as to what we have done to give something to America. I think to try and leapfrog back and take youngsters in 1989 and tell them about our agrarian background in Africa is almost impossible at this point in time. The other problem with this is I listened to one gentleman on the thing say, well, during the campaign we talked about Michael Dukakis as being a Greek American. Well, Greek American pinpoints a country called Greece. African American does not pinpoint any country. It is a continent. And therefore, either you're going to play a game called European American or African American, or otherwise, again, we still haven't been able to refine ourselves down to where we come from, whether we come from Nigeria or Kenya.
All right. Well, let me just go to Mr. Ture here. In the 1960s, as I said before, you were one of the ardent proponents of using the term black. How do you feel now about abandoning it in favor of African American?
Well, I do not even use the term African American. I use the term Africans because that's what we are. We're Africans in America. There's nothing American about us. Our history has only been a history of struggle in America. We are the only ethnic group in America who have to shed our blood to make reform. To get the vote, we must shed our blood. To get our children to school, we must shed our blood. To get on the bus and sit where we want, we must shed our blood. To even get in a filthy 5 and 10 cent store, we must shed our blood. So I don't see how we could be American. We're Africans in America struggling against American capitalism. And only until it's destroyed will we enjoy the rights that everyone else is speaking of.
Well, how do you respond to that, Mr. Llewellyn?
Well, what he's trying to do is to change the name of the game or change the rules. And I haven't got time to change the rules. I've got to look at what is. I guess I'm more practical about this. Maybe the ideal panacea is to change the rules and make it all a kind of a equal socialistic state. But in the meantime, let's talk about what is. This is a capitalistic society. We are here. We are paying our taxes. We are doing work each and every day. And I think we have the right to participate. We have sent people to war since the revolutionary times and spilled our blood for America, from Crispus Attucks and the Revolutionary War all the way down through this Vietnam. So therefore, I want to get what you can construe as my piece of the action like everybody else has gotten. And it really annoys me to see people who haven't made this kind of contribution over the years come here and feel that they can claim it and get it. And we have done that.
You have a response, sir?
Of course. In the first place, just because we're in the capitalist system doesn't mean we must love it. We were made slaves. It doesn't mean that while you're a slave, you must love slavery. A conscious slave, while picking cotton on the plantation, is thinking about how to escape, how to bring freedom. Therefore, just because we're in capitalism doesn't mean we must enjoy it. We have to fight for an equal society. That's our history. Our people show that we spill blood instinctively to advance humanity. And we have this responsibility to advance America, yes, to a socialist state.
You would seem to imply from your comment that capitalism is utterly inconsistent with Africa and Africans.
It is.
But I would posit that that's not true. If you look again at the nations of Africa, if you look at African people in every country of the world, especially in recent times, they essentially want things. They want products. They want the things that it's, at least up to this point, demonstrated that only capitalism, with its imperfections and with its inequities, which hopefully some people believe can still be tamed, people want things. And I don't somehow see a worldwide Pan-Africanism as also spelling the death knell for capitalism at the same time. It seems inconsistent. There are too many people who want cars in Lagos, Nigeria, last time I checked. The traffic jams are horrendous.
I don't think we can solve that one right now, but let me just go back to Ramona Edelin, because both Mr. Winter and Mr. Llewellyn talked about how they don't think it's possible to leapfrog over a lot of history and go back. It's impossible to go back to the agrarian life, that you can't even pinpoint a place in Africa where black people come from, if I'm paraphrasing your comments correctly. How do you respond to that?
Well, first of all, our culture and heritage in Africa entail far more than agrarian economies. Mathematics and science were born in Africa, philosophy and religion. And as well as that, we've been accomplished musicians and dancers for centuries. There's so much in our cultural heritage that we need to recoup right now, particularly for the children. And it is possible to leapfrog, as they put it. As a matter of fact, it's not only possible, it's necessary. Because if you begin with slavery, then you will still have children looking in your eyes as they do in mine, in our cities and in the streets, and saying, what difference does it really make to you, to me, or to anyone else, whether I live or die, whether I take drugs, whether I kill another person, whether I learn anything in school? We have a responsibility. And I think that one way we can have a cultural renaissance is to identify with the land base that gave us the wonderful things about our nature and our culture.
Mr. Llewellyn?
Well, that all sounds very nice and wonderful, but I invite you to take a look at Africa right now and today and look at the situation in Eritrea against Ethiopia and all the other things that have happened, Biafra with the Nigerians and what have you. That, in my opinion, is idealistic and not the gut of the problem. The gut of the problem is something called values. The gut of the problem is something called family. The gut of the problem is something called importance. What do we construe and believe to be important?
I would submit that without a cultural offensive, without our unifying at this particular time and saying what we believe in and who we are and how we will train our children and what our families mean to us, that we will continue to have those same gut issues. That's precisely the point. We will continue unless we develop a cultural vehicle which will move us forward. All groups move forward by strength of their culture. It is a myth that individuals move forward. And certainly we cannot accept 2 or 3 of our group emerging year after year while the vast masses of us continue to go down. We have a responsibility.
Let me raise a point back to you, Kwame Ture. When you launched this move that resulted in black being adopted as the defining symbol for African American people. Many people felt that it helped to purge them of all the negative feelings about themselves, that it really represented the first major psychological break. And you heard the woman in the tape talk about black is beautiful. I mean, that was the most positive affirmation of blackness by black people. What do you say to people now who say you simply cannot abandon the term that came to symbolize so much for black people?
Human progress does not stand still. It moves. We came here as Africans. One of the first organizations we had fighting for us is known as the Free African Society. The very first independent organization we had in this country was the church. It was known as the African Methodist Episcopalian Church. So from Africans, our oppressor has changed us to colored, to Negro, to this, to that. We understand it's a step. Coming to black had a powerful point, because the point was that we were oppressed because of this color of our skin, and this was racism. But this fight is not just a fight over the color of our skin. A fight for power is a fight for land. When Mr. Llewellyn speaks about power, he's talking about land. Our land is Africa. America is not our land. It belongs to the American Indians, and we have a right to stand and take a moral struggle with them. And we don't worry about people being for things. People want things is incorrect. The point is not to explain the world. The point is to change it. If the people want material things, then we have a responsibility to tell them that things more important than material things, like freedom.
Mr. Winter?
Well, I can't claim to have been there, indeed, when black was coined, because I was somewhat in high school and I was on the listening end as, indeed, you were doing the talking. But it's always been my feeling that black was more than the recognition of where our blood comes from. It has a lot to do with the experience of people of color in a larger sense under colonialism, whether it was external colonialism, let's say in the Caribbean, or the internal colonialism that we had to deal with here in the United States, rather than simply a statement of Africa. Because the fact is, we have become more than simply descendants of Africa. We have created a lot of what America is in our own image. When you talk about this cultural-based offensive, I would rather see us claim American culture, which is not European culture. America does not mean white. American doesn't mean white. It means a combination of European and African and Asian and the rest of the cultures of the whole world. This is what America is. And if it denies the fact of what is African within it, then it is up to us to continue to assert that no, America does not mean white. America means a melting and a combination of things.
I think that's the point. We are saying African and American, and not everyone is willing to say American, and not everyone is willing to say African. But the point is, we are trying to merge the two, and American society at this point in time does exclude the African reality. America is an African as well as a European invention. Well, we know that, but it isn't accepted widely as now.
Let me ask you this, Ms. Eland. What is wrong? Hakeem Madabuti said a few moments ago that in his writing and everything, he's going to use both. I mean, is there a problem with using African American for those who choose to, and for those who choose to use black, to use black?
No, I think we all will use both to a certain extent. First of all, it's going to be hard to break old habits that were very dear to us, and I certainly was along with Stokely in the days when the name was changed. But it is important to continue to draw the consciousness of our people to a set of values which were positive and productive for us. To call our mother's name is Africa. We are children without her if we leave that out, and I think that it's fair to say no one of us is satisfied with the status quo today.
Well, it seems that Time Magazine, in fact, has a piece on this week, and it says that for more than a century, descendants of freedmen have debated what name they should bear as a people, and in every instance, the shift in the change of appellation coincided with a new phase in the struggle for equality. Is that what's going on now, in your view? And what stage is this?
Yes, and I think this is a point of evolution in our culture. And it's the stage right before we cross the threshold to the 21st century. I think we are saying that there's a quickening of our will. We will not cross the threshold of the 21st century in the condition that we are today.
All right, let me ask Mr. Winter, what do you think about that?
I don't necessarily see this as a quickening, if you will, in that kind of direction. It seems to me that a move like this is an attempt more at a rhetorical assertion to sort of put a new name on things. But I don't see where it quite takes us to getting a better handle on what is immediately in front of us.
Maybe I should say, Charlene, that the cultural offensive is going to entail agenda setting, goal setting, working together to achieve our purposes. As you well know, Charlene, in the movement years, when you decided to desegregate the University of Georgia along with Ham, we were unified around your decision. We were purposeful. We were powerful. There was a sense of destiny, and we achieved our goal than the one that we are now engaged in.